should. Let's hope.
Yes.
Where's Josh?
Gosh,
I thought he was here.
he is.
He's here, he's in the hall.
Wait, you can wait 1 minute.
Oh, man, I can't.
We got 1 minute.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Ascension Parish, September 9th, Planning and Zoning Commission is now in session. Would you all please rise and join us as we say the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. For the record, like all commissioners are present, staff introduction, please.
Stacy Webb, Secretary for Planning and Development.
Cody Martin, Attorney for Planning and Zoning Commission.
Ricky Compton, Planning and Development Director.
Ben Moran, planner.
Lance Brock, zoning official.
Rhonda Bro, engineering.
Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge Councilman Sadlerly, and I think Councilman Joseph is present in the audience. I'd like to thank you for taking the time. Okay. Have no comments, Chairman has no comments. Can I get a motion for approval for the meetings of the prior meeting, the August meeting?
Move for approval.
Second.
It's a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
So noted, passed unanimously. First item on the agenda, consent agenda, affidavit of mortgage, declaration.
I move that we approve the consent agenda. I second the motion.
Second. Moved, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Item 9A, family petition, Leon J. Fickling property.
James Fowler representing Mike Gale and Earls and Associates on the following family partition. Comments were made, addressed, corrected on the plat, asking the commission for approval.
Commissioners' comments? Staff, please.
Sorry. Because it's an existing private access servitude, all the users are going to be required to sign it in a pre-deal servitude agreement being recorded. And contingent on that being done, recommend approval.
At this time, we'd like to open the floor, public hearing. Any cards? Anyone wishes to speak? At this time, we close the floor for public hearing. Can I get a motion?
I move that we approve. Second.
The motion is second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? So noted, it passes unanimously.
We note that that's a motion with the
Do we need to say that? Do we need to note that?
For the record,
But it
yes.
won't happen if they don't get the signature, so.
Right.
9B, Stevens property.
Representing O.W. Stevens Jr. on the following family partition, asking the commission for approval.
Staff,
All the comments were addressed, recommend approval.
any comments from commissioners? No comment? At this time, we open the floor for public hearing. Any cards? Anyone desires to speak? This time, we close the floor for public hearing. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
I'll second.
The motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? So noted, passes unanimously.
Thank you.
10A, public hearing to approve or deny the following preliminary plats. Myrtle Grove,
Good evening. Mickey Robertson, MR Engineering and Surveying, 9345 Interline Avenue. Here tonight representing the developer, Jameson Chauvin and Corbin Ladner, with Myrtle Grove Townhomes. It's 22 townhomes located on Highway 73. We have addressed all of the planning staff's comments. We have a couple of drainage comments outstanding. So we asked for conditional approval based on us working that out with DPW. And we spoke to them today and we felt like it wouldn't be a problem, just a few little lingering items to work out. So we're here to ask for your approval. Thank you.
staff comments?
This plat meets the new regulations for a townhouse development. They are requesting a variance on the 25-foot buffer requirement on lots 12, 13, and 14. Those lots encroach in it. During their pre-app meeting, Councilman Satterley was there, and he didn't have an issue with that because of what those lots back up to. One's the railroad and one's a commercial use, so they're not backing up to residential. And as far as drainage, Rhonda will answer questions on that.
Mickey and I have spoken today, and we think the last bit of comments for drainage can be worked out, so we're okay with the conditional approval.
Comments from commissioners? This time we'll open the floor for public hearing. Any cards anyone desires to speak? This time we close the floor for public hearing. Can I get a motion?
I'll move for approval. Do we need to make that motion with the contingencies of what the drainage impact study and
Yes.
just drainage impact study, because the buffer has been worked out? So I'll make that motion for approval with contingency upon the drainage impact study being approved.
The motion, can I get a second?
I'll second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? So noted. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Public hearing to approve or deny the following subdivision final plat. Sunshine Business Park.
Good evening, I'm Karen Kennedy with GWS Engineering. I'm here representing the developer. We have completed our final inspection and all punch list items have been addressed. So we're here requesting your approval.
Staff comments?
We have none. Everything on the plat has been taken care of, and I think I saw a letter from Rhonda that all the punch list items were final too.
Any comments from commissioners?
For the record, could we get Rhonda to say what he just said?
We sent a no objection memo for the signing of the final plat, so we're okay with everything that's been done.
Further comments from commissioners? This time we'll open the floor for public hearing. Any cards anyone desires to speak? This time we close the floor for public hearing. Can I get a motion?
I move that we approve. I'll second.
It's been motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? So noted. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Staff report.
After last month's meeting, I believe it was Commissioner Burgess requested that we put an item on the agenda to have a discussion, or roundtable, I guess, about a moratorium. And so that's what this item is.
Okay, I'd ask for this for consideration, since we've got the subcommittee on impact fees underway, and we've had lots of discussion about traffic, schools, et cetera, on virtually every subdivision we look at. I thought it'd be good for us to at least talk about, should we recommend to the council a moratorium on development until the impact fee is decided one way or the other? And that's why I wanted it on the discussion. Otherwise, we're going to be following our own rules and regs and adding to the problem.
Well, a moratorium on development, if the, assuming that the impact fee, that an impact fee is passed and adopted, makes sense. Then you could lift the moratorium and then you have some mechanism to make some traffic improvements. But if it's not adopted, what do you do with the moratorium? Do you continue it?
I think stage one would be to ask the council to do the moratorium until the impact fee is decided. If it's decided and the answer is no, then I think we have another discussion. What do we do?
Mhm.
Should we, go forward and ask for another extension or whatever? But I think we wait until that happens. But
But
I just see more and more problems.
I think that's very general, though. I mean, would it be a moratorium on all commercial development? Would it be a moratorium on major subdivisions? Would it be a moratorium on family partitions? Would it be a moratorium in Donaldsonville where they don't need a moratorium? Would it be a moratorium in Cinema where we don't need a moratorium?
Well, as a straw man, I would say residential development in the east side of the parish for any major subdivision.
Yeah, and I think the concept, because it's tied to the concept of an impact fee, it's tied to traffic, a transportation impact fee. And certainly, we've had a preponderance of new developments in the parish, proposed new developments. And they would generate the most amount of traffic, certainly. Now, there might be, if commercial establishments would generate a lot of traffic in the vicinity of the establishment, that's true. But I think, I agree with Robert that I think we're talking about the East Bank and major subdivision developments.
And then but we can't put a moratorium on housing in Livingston Parish. And I'd say half the traffic that comes through Ascension Parish is coming from other parishes for people to work here. So it wouldn't affect that traffic whatsoever. And just allow development to continue everywhere else so that they profit and we don't. All we get is their traffic.
That's tough.
Yeah,
I mean,
but I
a lot
don't
of
think
people
we're
come-
talking
You have
about-
plants that are expanding, you have people going back and forth to these plants just as much too. I mean, where do you stop that moratorium when it comes to the
Well, I
type
don't
of work
think we're
that people are
talking
gonna
about
do?
5 years here, we're talking about a few months.
I think you're looking at something like a 6-month, just, first of all, you're
Till
just
the
looking
impact
at it,
fee-
which is,
We get a decision.
Right.
They've got to finish their work and then get a decision, and
I'm having an impact fee committee meeting at the end of this month on the 29th, and I have sort of taken a somewhat different direction after having studied the proposal that was put together by the consultant some years ago and starting to gather data. I've also gathered a lot of information on impact fees around other parts of the country, and I think we're going to be prepared soon to be able to make recommendations for fees. There are some things that still have to be worked out. Which zones, how are the zones going to be established for impact fees? How would they be collected? A lot of details to work out, but I think we're going to be prepared to start coming up with dollar figures for impacts for homes and for commercial establishments, and at least be ready to put some recommendation together to the council.
And all this is assuming, and I guess Matt could be a better spokesman, or our attorney down there a better spokesman, is a moratorium
Yes.
legal?
A moratorium is legal. I've done some preliminary research on it. There's a U.S. Supreme Court case, Tahoe Sierra President Council versus Tahoe Regional Planning, 535 U.S. 302, which actually deals with the issue of a moratorium, the length of the moratorium, and what can actually be placed in a moratorium. Basically, it boils down to you can have a moratorium. It has to be for a specific time period. It has to be a reasonable time period. Basically, if you have a moratorium that's for an extended time period, that's outside of what the court would be considered reasonable, you have an issue of a takings under the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So basically, we can pass a moratorium, but it has to be specific as to what falls under the moratorium. It must be based on considerations of fairness and justice, and it must be for a reasonable time period. Based on the case law that I've looked at, I'd recommend not passing a moratorium for more than a 6-month time period.
When you say we, this commission can make a recommendation.
Recommendation to the planning council.
Has to actually decide whether or not.
That's to the parish council as to whether a moratorium will be passed or not.
And I think if something like this would, obviously very drastic, but it would call attention to the importance of impact fees. And, we've, over the past months, years actually, we look at each individual development, we look at a traffic impact study, and they're telling us that this one individual development has no impact. But when you add them all together, when you put them all, take the cumulative effect of it, obviously the traffic we're in is is really, really bad. So we don't have, if we had an impact fee, then each of those little developments would be able to do something to offset the impact that they have on traffic. So I think a moratorium would maybe galvanize the whole idea, call attention to it, and we could get a decision made in a reasonable time.
It also put pressure on our fellow commissioner, Gasper.
True. Well, at the last meeting, several people spoke pretty passionately about concern about an increased traffic due to additional developments and our lack of proper infrastructure, primarily transportation infrastructure, but also other infrastructure. And none of us disagree with that. That it is a problem here. I'm not a fan of a moratorium on anything, but I agree with Donald that it would at least call attention to the issue here. We were as a parish unable to pass a transportation tax. I understand why people are generally opposed to a tax, and we already pay pretty high taxes here. But so impact fees isn't the ultimate solution, but it's part of a solution. And I think if that is adopted by the council, whether it's this council or the new council, I think that it could help us a great deal. So, anyway.
I don't think we should try to make a point and stop all commerce just to make a point to the council to try and shame them into doing something. Because that's basically what you're saying that we could be doing.
I disagree. I don't think we're trying to shame anybody. I think we're trying to get to an answer.
Some areas of this parish do not need a moratorium. Maybe you could talk about the northeast corner of the parish, but 80% of the parish doesn't have the problems that you're talking about. Some of the parish does, and some of it doesn't. Some roads have a lot of traffic, some roads don't. So to blanketly say that that's what we're going to do, to make a point and stop commerce just to try to force the parish council to do something that you want them to do, I think is wrong.
Well, I don't think it's just to make a point, Maury. There were lots of people, including Councilman Satterley last month, who cautioned us that we continue to approve these preliminary plats for new developments, and with the understanding that even as our staff suggests, we don't have the infrastructure. In certain opinions, we don't have the infrastructure to support it.
But does it even make traffic worse to make housing developments be built somewhere else so that all of the traffic from them must travel across Ascension Parish for those people to go to work here?
Marty, I'm not in favor of a moratorium. Don't get me wrong. The
So
point
don't
is,
do it to make a point.
No,
is what
and
I'm saying.
I don't think it's to make a point. I don't think this commission should deny. Here's the thing, and this happened last month. We were asked to deny these new subdivision plats because the staff looks at our master plan and says we don't have the infrastructure to support these new developments. Well, I don't think it's up to this commission to establish a moratorium on development. I'm not even prepared to recommend it to the council. It is a point. A point has been made already. I don't know that we need to recommend a moratorium to make the point. The point's been made. Every time a new development comes up, there are people concerned about drainage and traffic. Every time.
It's the mantra.
Without exception.
Schools.
I think I think there's two things we need to be cautious of here. By and large, and it's not a completely blanket statement by any means, but every new subdivision that has come up, by and large, the people who come in against it are the neighboring landowners or people who live in a neighboring area. Most all of them preface every statement they say with, "I'm in favor of growth." But they have concerns about where the growth is being next to their land. Somebody lives at the end of a road that he's never had a neighbor in 50 years, and all of a sudden there's a new subdivision coming in, and they're concerned about that. And I think that's a legitimate concern, and those people have certainly every right to be heard. but we don't have a general outcry from the population as a whole with new subdivisions. It's pretty limited to the landowners next to where the development is coming. And what we have is we have a set of rules that we have to follow. Those rules were adopted by the council, who is the elected representatives. Those are the people in touch with the people who, and responsive to the people who put them there. Presumably, if there was a public outcry, they would be more reactive to that, but the council hasn't. And because they don't have the votes, from what I can understand, to either change the land development code as it is, or to make significant changes at this point. They've said, we just don't have the votes, which means that not all of the parish feels that way. And so we have this set of rules where if somebody purchases a piece of property for the purpose of putting it into commerce, which is not an inherently illegal thing to do, it happens all the time, and to come in and say, okay, well, we know you bought this property, we know you're jumping through the hoops that we set forth in the land development code, but we're going to shut you down for a month or 6 months or however long for a period to study it. I just think we're on a dangerous slope, and we need to be very cautious on this. We don't have the authority to make the rules and to pass the rules. The council has to do that. Our job is to apply those rules. And if there is that public outcry, then presumably the council, who's responsive to the electorate, would respond to that. And I just, when you're dealing with people's rights to use their property in a manner consistent with the law, their investment on that, we're flirting into constitutional issues of takings and things of that nature. I just think it's very, I think when you're talking about a moratorium, we have to be very, very cautious on this. And I don't know that I would favor one simply to have this study go on. The study's going on, the committee's appointed, but people are working under the rules as they are right now. And I think they have a right to do that.
And as we've said many times here, people want to move to Ascension Parish for lots of reasons. If traffic and drainage and other things get untenable, if they just get too bad, people are going to have second thoughts about moving here. And when it gets to that point, we're going to be, saturated. We're not saturated right now. People still want to move here. Developers still want to develop. But at some point, if we don't fix the problem, that's gonna slow down and stop just naturally.
And the simple fact of the matter is infrastructure is a regional problem. Driving to Baton Rouge any morning, you're going to sit in traffic because they're not equipped for the population expansion. So it's something that has to be addressed, and I think the elected officials are doing their best to address that. And in the meantime, we have our rules that we're given to work with.
Very well said.
Thank you.
I've had my discussion. I bow to the legal minds.
I think what is clear, that this environment is being challenged. Our infrastructure, utilities are being challenged. This is the most rapid growing area in the state of Louisiana. The number one and number $2 for the state of Louisiana is coming from New Orleans and Baton Rouge. We're right in the middle. We have the number 2 school district in the state. If I were bringing the business, I wanted to live, this is a hot place to be in. So what is clear, and we ask the council to take a look at those levels that are being pushed to the edge. Every now and then you hear in the media, raw drainage sewerage is back in somebody's yard. It is apparent that some of our utilities were not designed, for what is growing to now. At some point, and I've asked this before, we need to consider maintaining some capacities for the ecology, the environment, infrastructure, utilities. To know that when we bring in new business, housing, people, once again, we pushing the envelope near the edge. At some point, we need to be able to say, you know something, we need to educate the public, because we've been through this before where we've lost in elections trying to get a millage passed for something. At some point, we're going to pay for it either in advance, by good planning, or after the fact, by the levels being overburdened. It is clear, as each commissioner has stated, that we're being challenged. I ask that those in position, council, please understand and take a look at this picture. I agree it is a regional concept problem. The region stretches from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. We're in the middle of that region. This tells us that we have to do something. We can't sit here and say, don't want to pay a new tax. We have to do something. So it's an eye-opener. Engineering staff report.
We currently have 11 subdivisions that are currently in bond, 14 in infrastructure, and several others, adding up to 41 subdivisions either in bond or in infrastructure right now. It's a pretty significant number. Commercial sites, we have approximately 26 that are currently in the middle of infrastructure.
Any further comments?
Move that we adjourn.
Yes? It's been moved second. All in favor?
Aye.
We'll take a 5-minute recess before we move to the zoning.